Right now, the red state party has Americans seeing red, poll after poll now showing just how badly the GOP shot themselves in the foot with the shutdown and the debt limit chicken fight. So the question is, what will it mean as the nation looks forward? And then the headline, America cannot seem to prevent another school shooting, another student pulling the trigger. More tears and more parents left wondering why. But how about some culpability at home? Are parents to blame when the kids use their guns to kill? We'll get into that conversation. And later, the inexplicable pictures that followed Sunday's Jets game. You've seen the video. You probably know what happened. Will this lead to changes at big sporting events? We'll get into that. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thanks so much for joining us this Tuesday evening, October 22nd. As you saw from the lead there, quite a few different subjects we'll get into, plus a record-setting fine on Wall Street. We'll talk about $13 billion later, where JP Morgan Chase goes from here. Now, you may remember the days when Republicans thought it was a good idea to shut down the government and demand concessions from passing, or I should say raising the debt limit and avoiding default. Actually, there are still some out there who insist it wasn't a bad move. It was something that they do and maybe even do again. But they did so and would do so in the face of a mountain of evidence to the contrary, with more seeming to come out pretty much every day. And I'm talking number after number. We're going to get the latest on just how wrong they were. I'm going to bring in Andrew Whitman, senior political correspondent. This latest poll is kind of a punctuation point.
Yeah, Rich, I think we're now beyond the point where there's any debate on whether the shutdown and debt showdown was a bad idea for the GOP. The question now is, how bad will it be? Bad enough to just impact coming policy fights, or bad enough to cost the GOP the House just 55 weeks from now?
The U.S. economy added 148,000 jobs in September, fewer than economists were predicting, but strong enough to lower the unemployment rate to 7.2%, a nearly five-year low. The jobs report was delayed by more than 2 weeks due to the government shutdown, and a new ABC News Washington Post poll out today shows that the 16-day standoff left everyone in Washington battered and bruised.
There were no winners in this. It's understandable that your frustration with what goes on in Washington has never been higher.
It's a new low for Congress. Only 12% approve of the job lawmakers in Washington are doing. 85% disapprove.
I join the American people in their disgust at what happened in terms of the shutdown of government.
And criticism of the shutdown is focused on Republicans. The poll found that 77% of Americans disapproved of the way congressional Republicans handled the budget talks that led to the crisis. Only 21% approved.
Shutting down the government, in my view, is not conservative policy. So there'll not be another government shutdown. You can count on that.
The midterm elections are just over a year away, and incumbents beware. The ABC Post poll found that only a quarter of registered voters now say they're likely to re-elect their members of Congress. A whopping two-thirds say they're inclined to look elsewhere.
The public is ready for the Congress to behave better. This is a second chance.
But the public may no longer be willing to give this Congress another chance. CNN poll shows 54% of Americans now believe that a Republican-controlled House of Representatives is bad for the nation. People from both parties joining together calling for a change in House leadership. 63% say they'd rather see another Republican lead the House besides John Boehner. But the real scare for Republicans right now, and the people who donate money and energy to their campaigns, the growing signs that this mess could impact next year's midterms. Generic ballot, no candidate names. Democrats win 48-40, the largest split that we've seen in years. USA Today suggesting Republican incumbents could be in serious trouble. Voters in Republican districts by a 9-point margin say they're less likely to re-elect their current member of Congress. Voters in Democratic districts 1% more likely. Finally, 47% of Americans say the country would be better off if most members of Congress were replaced. That number not just unusually large, it is larger than when asked the same thing in 2006. When Democrats swept to control of the House, and it's also a bigger number than we saw in 1994 when Republicans took control for the first time in a half-century. Both were wave elections, both preceded by less voter anger than we're seeing right now. Rich?
All right, Andrew, thank you very much. And to help break all this down, let's bring in our panel tonight. And joining us for the first time, columnist for Newsday, political analyst, author. He's also the voice of Stormy on the hit cartoon series, Seal Lad 2020, a Renaissance man. Ellis Hennigan.
Hey, good to be here.
Nice
of you to mention the cartoon voice, by the way.
And that's the last one to hit, right? Dominic Carter, political journalist and author, but as we like to say, so much more. Chris Chase, former Connecticut congressman, distinguished fellow, and I emphasize distinguished, distinguished at the University of New Haven, and Andrew Whitman, who you've already met. All right. Listen, people get bombarded by numbers, but if you could, Congressman, talk about the significance of it, because you've seen wave elections before. The anger and antipathy of the general public right now seems to be very real. If you were an incumbent, would you be nervous in Washington?
I was thinking if I was an incumbent, I'd be really nervous. This is almost like an earthquake.
Yeah.
And it's typical, frankly, of what my party does sometimes. We were on a roll with President Clinton. We were getting things done. We had a partner, and we proceeded to seek to impeach him. I didn't vote to impeach him, but my party did. And the end result is we lost 6 seats in the 6-year presidential term. Now we're in the 6-year presidential term. We should be picking up seats, not losing seats.
And if you look at the layout in terms of some of the races that are teed up for Republicans in the Senate, at least, next year, I mean, you got chances to pick up real seats, but what did they waste 2 weeks on when they could have been going after the president on the rollout that was...
Fortunately, we have time. Fortunately, we have enough time.
He mentioned 55 weeks, did Andrew. And Alice, you've seen these waves before. This does, as Andrew said, it's got a familiar ring to it. People have had it. And they're pointing their finger, not just a pox on both houses, but particularly Republicans.
Yeah, and the numbers are dramatic. I mean, let's just admit it. At this point, I think the only 2 things with lower approval ratings are deer ticks and poison ivy, and they're and we may be moving in on both of those. But one note of caution on the numbers, Richard. These are national numbers, and in fact, the vast majority of the congressmen that we're talking about are running in districts that don't necessarily reflect the national views. They're in these ruby red gerrymandered districts, and so even if the mass of Americans is disgusted at this stuff, it may be that the voters in those districts keep sending those boys and girls back.
Ellis, you're right here, but Dominic, I think about in the last few cycles what happened. Each state, even if they're red states, they'll primary a popular or at least an established incumbent, and it'll have ripples beyond just that area. I mean, look what happened with Delaware, right here. I mean, Castle should be sitting in Washington right now. He lost his job. Look what happened in Indiana. I can go down the list here. And that didn't just stay within the borders of that state. That showed the party wasn't ready for prime time. They run that risk again here if the result of those polls is whatever moderate Republicans are left get primaried in their own districts.
Well, definitely that's the case. The one thing, as Congressman pointed out, Congressman Shays, the good thing for Republicans right now, and there is no silver lining in any of this for Republicans, but the only good thing is they have time on their side. So there's time to perhaps stop the hemorrhaging. There's time if the Democrats continue to screw up health care.
Okay, well, that's a perfect segue, because, Andrew, they're going to have their first test to see if they want to win next year, or they're trying to figure out which part of the party they're playing to, because they've got it teed up. Obamacare has been a disaster for a rollout right now. Legitimate questions as to why something that wasn't ready for prime time was put out the way it was. However, they have a choice. They can hold hearings and demand that Sebelius be fired and possibly overplay their hand like they did with the shutdown and not be seen to fix the problem, but still trying to defund the program. Or they could go and try and tweak the program and make changes here that might even play politically. I think I already know, but where do you think they're going to go?
Well, does anybody think that they're going to handle this gently and deftly? I mean, I don't think we've seen any indication of that really on any major issue that we've had from Republicans, especially in the House. It's been, let me grab this live electric wire and try to kill the thing. And they seem to be getting the shocks themselves in the process. I don't think they're going to be able to resist overstepping or overplaying their hands.
What would be
Does
a
anybody
wise
at the panel
play?
think otherwise?
What would be a wise play that Republicans right now have a legitimate, not some contrived argument that the Obamacare rollout has been mishandled to put a play?
It's not going to be repealed. But it needs to be improved because the president wrote this bill with just Democratic support. He made some really bad deals in order to get it passed. And it's not a good bill. It needs to be improved. You need to make sure you look at tort reform.
First of all, it's got to work if you go to it.
Right. Well, we're just talking about the software and getting that working. But there's a lot of things that could improve on the bill, and they should try to make it a better bill.
I will say, you look at Ellis, they're starting to do, people are doing their math, and they're saying my existing plan that I'm on versus this plan, what would be better for me? And I'm overstating this greatly. And I still think we have to do something. People who wanted to preserve the status quo just aren't realists. However, a lot of people are finding if you have any insurance, this is costing you more to sign up for this than if you stayed with your plan. Not with a pre-existing condition, but with that exception, people are saying the math's not adding up for them. At least those are the early returns.
Yeah, I did the math for myself, and I save a couple $100, and I think the experiences will be different. Here's, Richard, how you'll tell whether Republicans are serious. Do they step forward with another plan to ensure the tens of millions of people that you're talking about? So far they haven't. All they've done is bash the Obamacare. But when they get serious enough to say, you know what, we have these complaints, some of which Chris is alluding to, and here's what we do that will be better, then I think we could have a great conversation about it.
But this is going to be Benghazi, this is going to be Acorn, right. This is going to be, you know, Muslim Brother. I mean, this is
right.
going to be...
When Darrell Issa,
right.
Congressman from California, is the one sending the letters, as he did today, you know reasoned conversation is not getting ready.
It's almost like he can't help himself.
But they might be on their best behavior. I mean, they've already touched the third rail, and they're not going to get a second opportunity at this. I think with midterms coming up a couple of months after all of this is happening, that they will be on their best behavior.
Okay, that said, though, look who was probably arguably the biggest arsonist in the firestorm we had, which was Ted Cruz. The reception he got, and I know it was back home in Texas
of
here,
course.
But he made it clear, he and Mike Lee, and I can go on here, they don't feel chagrined by what went down. And if we think they'll go quietly in the good night to do what's right for the party here, not just for themselves, I think we're kidding ourselves.
Yeah, but let's not get carried away. I mean, he did a filibuster. Anybody can do a filibuster.
But you know how TV works now. How do we work? We're going to take the guy who's going to say the soundbite, who's going to make sure he's going to self-promote himself and have some following, and we're going to put him on every Sunday morning. He's going to make sure, like he did, hold a press conference the same day that Mitch McConnell, the same moment Mitch McConnell goes to the floor to announce they have a deal. He's a pyromaniac, and I don't see, unless the party can rein him in, he's your worst nightmare. It's not Democrats or the president, it's from within. Yeah. And you know how TV works by now. We're going to give this guy airtime.
I couldn't have said it better.
Yes, thank you.
Don't forget, though, there are different audiences here. If we want to talk about who's being swayed and not, you got to tell me who the people are. And I think in Texas, his numbers, even outside of that room of those cheering Republican women, people do seem to like this kind of stuff, you know?
They do. And the people, and I interviewed at the RNC Communications Department, they actually mentioned his name along with Rand Paul as credible presidential candidates. Didn't force it out of him. They're volunteering this. And my point is, my gosh, at least, how long did it take the Democrats to figure out we've got to win? You know, we can't stop letting one wing of the party dominate it. They at least figured that out. It used to be always the Republicans with the party discipline. The Lee Atwaters of the world used to crack the whip here to make everybody get in line. Now,
it's not really one party anymore.
Let me make sure that we remember, though, that Nancy Pelosi would be Speaker, and she doesn't have many more fans than John Boehner has.
But they kept the liberal wing and the progressive wing of the party more under wraps than Republicans have with the Tea Party. I don't think that's arguable.
Where's Joe Biden?
I don't know. It's a good question.
Yeah. They've kept a few people under wraps.
Where's Waldo? Where's Joe? All right. When we come up, Election Day, just 2 weeks away. We're going to put the race up at the top job, both in Nassau County in the spotlight and also what's going on in the Big Apple. Should we believe these polls? Alice is going to tell us if we could have a shakeup once again here or not. And in New York City, Joe Loda, time running out for him. He's got a big shot tonight. We're going to ask Dom what he ought to do here, because the ads say one thing while the debate performances says something completely different. We'll be right back.